The Denver Broncos put up a good fourth quarter effort, but it was not good enough as they fall on the road. 3-2 on the season, but they lose 27-19. We break down the Broncos' concerning offense and some of the concerns that are starting to raise themselves up on the defensive side of the ball. What do the Broncos do at cornerback? Sayre, Bedinger, myself, we break it down on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked on NFL Network, your team every day. The Broncos dropped to 3-2 on the season after a road loss where it didn't seem like they ever got off the bus. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, and I'm joined alongside my co-host, Sayre Bedinger, as we break down the Broncos post-game report here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Just a reminder, Locked On Broncos is free and available everywhere you get your podcasts, and thank you so much for making this podcast your first listen of the day. Sayre, my friend, look, I don't even know if there's enough words that we could put into just how frustrating the Sunday product was for this Denver Broncos football team, losing 2 games in a row, my man. A lot to break down here today for Broncos country.
It is a lot to break down, and it's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow. You know, this was a game that I think, based on the way the Steelers had been playing this season, I feel like everyone in Broncos country not necessarily thought, okay, easy victory against the Steelers, but definitely more of a winnable game than it seemed like when the schedule was released. Anytime you go into Pittsburgh, it's a tough environment. But we talked about this last week, Cody. Ben Roethlisberger is not necessarily cooked or done or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still a very smart player, still capable of pushing the ball downfield. So the Denver Broncos, unfortunately, had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah, well, what went wrong, Broncos country? Well, we're going to tell you right here, everything went wrong. I mean, from the moment they got off the bus. Look, and not to make an excuse, I don't think it's a valid excuse. It may have a little bit of a factor into it, but obviously the Broncos got in late last night. Doesn't really affect too much because you're not doing anything strenuous on the flight over. You're resting, you're recovering. So you get off the flight, you get checked into your hotel room, you go to sleep, you wake up, you have morning meeting, breakfast, and then bam, you're off to the stadium. So that's not much of an excuse there. Maybe logistically, if they had more time, I don't know. I mean, would that have made a difference? Probably not, because really what boils down to the Broncos' execution on both sides of the ball on Sunday against the Steelers, it was bad. And when your special teams unit is your best unit of the day, Sayre, there's a problem. And so let's go to the roots here. Obviously, in a 27-19 victory, so many opportunities where we look back and we say, wow, what would have happened if this happened? I felt like that could be applicable on so much. Alexander Johnson has 2 interceptions in his hands that he drops, and subsequently after that, Pittsburgh Steelers go out and they score a touchdown. So there's 14 points off of 2 missed turnover opportunities. That's the part I hate the most about football, Sayre. The what if, what could have happened, but it's not good enough in the NFL. The Broncos, their issues continued. Let's start on the offensive side. I mean, really, this is the key theme. They got going in the fourth quarter, but it doesn't matter at that point when you can't get it together for 3 quarters. 2 of 12 on third down is a evident concern here. The Broncos couldn't do anything anytime they got the football, and anytime they had a big play, it came back. The best play of the day, one of the early on in that first half, was Javonte Williams' big-time run down to the 2-yard line. He gets excited, spikes the ball, 5-yard penalty, and all of a sudden you take a 12-yard sack, and you have to settle for a field goal. It's just like, that's the story of the Broncos offense. And Broncos fans have every right to be upset. This, in my opinion, Sayre, was a failure on behalf of the coaching staff to prepare these guys. The players didn't execute. But, man, once again, for the second consecutive week, Denver gets out-coached.
Exactly. And we talked about this leading up to the game, the fact that we wanted the Broncos to come out in this contest and really impose their will. They haven't done that so far this season, even in the games that they've, kind of dominated in the end against the Giants, the Jaguars, and the Jets, 3 pretty bad teams, obviously. But even in those games, they didn't necessarily establish themselves as sort of the alpha. I mean, if that's the way you want to put it, so to speak. So what I'm talking about is the fact that you come out in this game, you don't exactly establish yourself at the line of scrimmage in the running game offensively. You don't establish, hey, we can do anything we want in the passing game. There was none of that from the Broncos offense. It seemed more like Pat Shurmur was once again not necessarily experimenting, but really trying to force that running game in there to get some kind of continuity or to gain some bigger chunks on first and second down to put the passing game in manageable situations. We just haven't seen that from the running game. And I know, of course, somebody tweeted at me, look at Javonte Williams' yard per carry average. It's like, that doesn't matter. It all came off of one big run. the fact of the matter is the Broncos running game just simply isn't working out right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying abandon it completely. Of course, we argued against that all last week. Everybody spent a whole week, debating with Pat Shurmur online, getting mad online about the fact that he abandoned the running game. But man, if the offensive line isn't generating a push, if they're not winning their matchups, if they're not winning the line of scrimmage, there's no point in trying to establish that running game, because what did we see? Run, pass. Run, pass. We might as well be chanting it at this point. That's what we saw in the first half. The Broncos offense was just a little too predictable in that regard. And on passing downs, when you're predictable, especially when you empty out the backfield, that to me doesn't make any sense, by the way. But there's just so many different things I think Pat Shurmur is doing. I think it's accurate to say at this point, early in games, he's not calling good plays. He's either not writing a good 15-play script, he's not calling good plays, he's not understanding the game flow, he's not exploiting defensive tendencies that are poor. All of those things are coming together to make it look like the Broncos are completely inept on that side of the ball.
Well, and we're going to describe, obviously, some of the bigger issues on the offensive side of the ball, some things specifically in this game in our upcoming portion here on the show. But even just going back to what you had said there, we had said in our keys to victory, the Broncos, they need to come out in this game and they need to dictate the pace here. And they didn't do that. I mean, the Steelers came in from the very onset, smacked them in the mouth. And look, we'll talk about Kyle Fuller. We'll talk about the Broncos defense here in a little bit. But looking at the Broncos defense in this game is sort of our game recap. Obviously, the Broncos dropping a 3-2 on the season, 2 games in a row, losing to AFC North conference opponents. You look at Pittsburgh, 7 of 12 efficiency on third down, completely unacceptable. We'll dive into the defense bread and butter there here in a second. And then the Broncos defense giving up 147 rushing yards to the NFL's 32nd ranked rushing offense. It's just a simply embarrassing performance by the Broncos offense and defense, just collectively as a team today. There's no other way to put it. But we're going to talk about the Broncos offense and why something needs to change, not just next week, but immediately right now in the philosophy and the thinking of the Broncos offensive staff and just personnel. Coming up here in just a moment, we're going to get to that. But before we do that, let me tell you about the sponsor. Today's post-game report. It's good friends over there at DirecTV Stream. And does this sound familiar to you? You're always hassling to find the remote. You're trying to figure out the login to your best friends, neighbors, uncles, catfishes, log into whatever thing that they have. Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore with DirecTV Stream, where you get all your live sports, your live TV, your on-demand favorites, all in one place. You can cut the cord today. And DirecTV Stream, it brings you everything from live TV on-demand favorites together in one place like never before, so you can watch all of that in one place. That means no more juggling those remotes, like I said, and you don't have to buy any more devices ever again with DirecTV Stream today. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can check out directtv.com for more details. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. All right, Sayre, opening up the second half action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos post-game report. A very disappointing 27-19 loss by the Denver Broncos, a comeback attempt fueled by the offense, who put it together in the fourth quarter, but too late for them to actually get in a rhythm here. I want to focus on some of these issues. We alluded to some of them just a moment ago in our game recap, but let's talk about the last 2 weeks for the Broncos. Really, this has been every week. So 5 weeks of the season, third down has been an issue for this team. In the last 2 games combined, they are 5 of 26 on third down. If that's not a telling issue as to, hey, something needs to change with this offense, with the philosophy, then I don't know what is. But we've seen in the last 2 weeks, the Broncos, they're going backwards on first down, and they're also facing third and longs. And on those third and longs, look, I understand Teddy's going to try to take what the defense gives him, but I felt like in this game against Pittsburgh, we really saw him going through the short stuff. 3rd and 15, you're going to throw out 5 yards and try to get yards after the catch, try to get favorable field position for a field goal. That is not sustainable. And Sayre, I think what we've seen from the Broncos offense in these last 2 weeks, like I said, I wanted to have an open mind. Okay, hey, look, the offense are doing some really good things in the first 3 weeks of the season. Yes, it's against bad opponents, but you still have to execute and do those things. Now they're not doing the things that they were good at in those games. And that, to me, I think is a little bit of a concern when we talk about what you have on your plate, whether it's your bread, your meat, your potatoes. There is a bigger picture here, and a lot of it is on the coaching staff.
Exactly, it is. And we've talked about a number of issues, whether it's the play calling in general or whether it's specifically what Teddy Bridgewater is seeing on these third down plays. It's really tough to say one or the other. It's kind of a chicken or the egg type of thing. I mean, is Teddy Bridgewater throwing in front of the sticks because that's the play that's designed, or is he throwing it in front of the sticks because that's, just a conservative play to either punt or not turn it over or whatever the case may be. It's really frustrating to see, just because not that you have to go deep on every 3rd and 12 or whatever the case may be. There's times where those dump offs and screens do work, but at the same time, there was another 3rd down play later in this game where Teddy was trying to throw it to Kendall Hinton, who was 2 yards short of the line to gain, and the ball was tipped at the line of scrimmage by Cam Hayward, which saved us an opportunity to bag on Teddy Bridgewater had Kendall Hinton actually caught the ball, because he would have been tackled immediately and in front of the sticks. So that to me just doesn't make any sense. And you've got too many receivers there was times where the receivers are all running the same exact route, and it's like, well, none of those receivers running the same exact route ended up open. So I guess what do? We either take a sack or we have to throw it away. I think there's way too many low percentage plays being called on 3rd downs, whether Pat Shurmur is asking Teddy Bridgewater to throw it way too far downfield or whether he's throwing it way too short in front of the sticks. It's just not a formula for success on 3rd down, and we're seeing the results of that. We're seeing the results of the Broncos just simply being either too conservative or too aggressive, not playing to the strengths of their players, which we know, Cody, as you and I have talked about a number of times, yards after the catch. Where's the yards after catch opportunities for Noah Fant? I didn't see that in this game. Like you mentioned when we were talking before the show, no targets before the 4th quarter. And then after that, just a couple. So it was, that's tough to watch. That's tough to stomach, because early in the game, your strategy is to have Noah Fant blocking TJ Watt, which no offensive tackles can really do. So you're asking your receiving tight end to block the best pass rusher in the game, arguably. I don't understand it. And it leads to those opportunities on 3rd down they're just not high percentage looks for your offense. It leads to sacks of Teddy Bridgewater. It leads to tip balls at the line of scrimmage. It leads to this, that, and the other. And ultimately, it's led to stressful, end of game situations and 2 straight losses for this team.
Well, and it's out there too, the blueprint on how to really stop the Broncos offense. Look, and I want to clarify this too, Broncos country. The Broncos don't have a quarterback problem. They have an offensive problem, right? And then that trickles down to quarterback. It trickles down to offensive line and protection. It trickles down to injuries, where the Broncos don't clearly have a wide receiver that can create that separation. But you also are not going to the guys that can make and win those 50-50 balls. It took the Broncos until really that 2nd quarter and that final kind of drive there to really try to get the ball to Courtland Sutton, who had a couple of catches, and then the Broncos had to punt the football away. And then you open up, you go to Courtland, you go to Tim Patrick, but Tim Patrick only had 1 target in that first half. And going back to what you mentioned about Noah Fant there, 0 targets through the first 3 quarters of action. He is a first-round tight end that you drafted specifically to be an offensive weapon for you, and he's not utilized, more so just as a blocker. You have Eric Sauber, you have Andrew Beck, guys that you could have utilized in protection. If you wanted to go 13 personnel, you could have done that. But Noah Fant is not being used as a weapon. He's not being used as a receiving option consistently enough. And that, to me, that is on the coaching staff. Sayre, I don't think anybody will disagree with you and I here if we say, look, the Broncos on offense, they have the talent. They have personnel to be successful, but they are just not doing it. So it comes down to a fundamental issue. And this is the argument, too, about the new NFL, the modern era, where you look at coaches, you look at a lot of these young coaches that are offensive minds that are getting these big-time jobs. Or you're looking at, like, even Brandon Staley right now is getting a lot of praise for the Chargers, but they have a young offensive mind over there helping out with Herbert. They're playing to their team's strengths, which it seems like the Broncos aren't simply doing that on the offensive side of the ball. That is a coaching issue. And look, I just couldn't help but wonder, sitting there watching this game and thinking to myself, what is George Payton thinking about right now? Like, what's going through his mind? Because it's evident the Broncos, it's a whole entire offensive unit problem. We've seen for the 2nd consecutive week in a row how much you miss having KJ Hamler and Jerry Jeudy out there just from a separation standpoint. But even when they come back, how are you going to scheme to get those guys open if you're not placating to, I think, what your strength is as a football team, which it has to be to run the ball. But Sayre, as you mentioned, if you're not getting pushed, if you're going backwards on 1st down, you can't run the ball on 2nd and long, because then you're going to face either a 3rd and long or you're going to face a 3rd and medium. And that's not a good formula for sustainability in the NFL. The blueprint is out there. The Broncos offense, it's easy to go against them now. It's predictable. Something has to change, or the Broncos might have to make a change. And Sayre, that's what I want to ask now, because look, I get it. There's a lot of Broncos fans say, hey, look, Pat Shurmur has to go. If you're going to fire Pat Shurmur, who would be a guy that could take over as the interim? I look at Curtis Modkins, who has offensive coordinator experience. I look at Zach Azzani, who has a passing game coordinator experience. But how does that change the philosophy of this football team, even if you make that change in season?
It definitely would fire some guys up, I think. I mean, of course, No pun intended on that one either. But I mean, I think it would definitely get your players kind of to wake up a little bit. And I don't know that it's necessarily like you mentioned. It does seem like a coaching issue. It doesn't seem like a player's issue. It feels like the Broncos need all of Twitter to come in and be the offensive coordinator. But the second best option outside of that might be Zach Azzani. I think that he's kind of a rising up and coming guy in this league. He's a coach that I think is going to get some looks outside of just being a wide receivers coach in the near future. And you can still let him coordinate the offense and be the receivers coach. There's plenty of coaches in the league that do those types of things. So I think that that's an option. And I think you have to consider it maybe in the near future. And I don't know that Vic Fangio will. We've seen how long the leash is for, Tom McMahon on the special teams. And so it's hard to imagine. Of course, Rich Scangarello was let go after just one season, which that's a whole
The offense was playing so much better than this product is.
It really was. And that's tough because there was plenty of times where we were like, man, Rich Scangarello, does this guy know the flow of the game? Does he even understand what he's doing out there? Of course, he had some brilliant play designs, but that may be the same issue with Pat Shurmur. Man, you've got some really brilliant play designs out there, but you've got to understand game flow. You can't just go out there and run it on first down and for a 2-yard loss or a zero, a net zero on the play, and then go out and just smash it again. Late in the game in the fourth quarter, you're running some kind of horizontal backwards pitch to Javonte Williams coming across the field. I mean, I don't understand it. And of course, they look really good if it works. But at the same time, when it doesn't work, you just can't help but think back to all these different plays that didn't work. And it's like, well, does Pat Shurmur actually, know what he's doing calling games out there right now? It doesn't seem like he's very self-aware. It doesn't seem like he's playing to his players' strengths. It doesn't seem like he's getting the right guys involved early and often. And obviously, how many games in a row that Pat Shurmur has been the coordinator have the Broncos failed to score on the opening drive? That's been a huge, huge problem. I believe 24 games, right? So, 24 straight games, and who's been the coordinator for those games? So, of course, Rich Scangarello, he had his issues, but Pat Shurmur, man, you've got an opportunity with Teddy Bridgewater. This guy is completing a high percentage of his throws, and I just don't understand what the disconnect is early in games here. It's definitely frustrating, and it's tough to watch.
You can't afford to get off to slow starts against good football teams. And look, hats off to the Steelers defense. They brought the intensity. They came after everybody. They were aggressive. And look, I like the way that the Broncos responded in that fourth quarter. But like I said, it's too little, too late. You can't wait until that type of effort in that fourth quarter to get there. And you still had a chance. And look, Teddy threw an interception to seal the game on fourth down. It was an out-breaking route. He throws it too far inside. The corner's playing it perfectly. And it's just an accumulation. So like I said, Broncos country, it is an offensive issue going down from obviously quarterback mistakes, coaching mistakes, so on and so forth. I think that there's a lot of pressure. Something needs to change here. And this is a big week because now the Las Vegas Raiders are coming to town, which poses some questions here for the Broncos defense. And we're going to address some of the issues that we saw in this game against the Steelers that have us concerned going forward. Coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about the other post-game sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. They're good friends over there at Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market. And I tell you what, Sayre, I'm so glad that you finally got your Churro Puff box in the mail. Fantastic. Honestly, it's the best tasting flavor of Built Bar I've ever had, which is a lot to say because they have a lot of amazing flavors. Peanut butter brownie, salted caramel, double chocolate, apple almond crisp. They have so many flavors at Built.com. But I also like Built Bar, Sayre, not only just for the great taste, but because it's the healthiest protein bar that is out there on the market. 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. The perfect combination between healthy and dessert. You get the best of both worlds there. And you can get your hands on a box of Built Bar today by going to Built.com using promo code LOCK15. It's going to get you 15% off your next order at Built.com. Once again, promo code LOCK15 is going to get you 15% off at Built.com. Get your hands on a box of Churro Puff Built Bar today. Jumping into the fourth quarter action, today's episode, Locked On Broncos, our post-game report. Just want to say thank you, Broncos country, for making Locked On Broncos your first listen every single day. We appreciate your support, whether you're watching here on YouTube where you can hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss out on everything. I know the things are doomy and gloomy right now, Broncos country, and there's a lot to be concerned about. But Sayre and myself, we will always try to be a voice of reason to help guide Broncos country through the tumultuous waters that is the NFL season and apparently the Broncos offensive season so far. But Sayre, look, let's talk about the defense here. You know, as advertised through the first 3 weeks, We saw some setbacks, I think, in week 4 where they really tried to sell out against the run. They stopped the run for the most part collectively in that game against Baltimore. They limited those opportunities outside of a couple of big plays. But man, from the onset of this game against a 32nd ranked rushing offense, this defense gave up a $147, and they gave up 7 to 12 on third down to Big Ben and company. Just so many missed opportunities. But let's talk about really the bigger concern here on defense. Now, people are going to say, well, the Broncos secondary is a huge concern. I'm not as worried about Patrick Surtain, Bryce Callahan, Kareem Jackson, not even Justin Simmons. I'm more worried about Kyle Fuller, who, when you look back on this game, he gave up well over 100 yards to multiple receivers combined in this matchup. And Pittsburgh and other teams this season, they have targeted him and they've gone after him. And he's also failed to come up and tackle. And it was really evident on Sunday where this, I think, was Kyle Fuller's worst game as a Bronco.
I think so, too. I think there's no question about it. He has been giving up big plays all season, though. So we knew going into this game, that was kind of what's the weak link on this in this secondary is Kyle Fuller giving up big plays. And so that was once again the problem. And you and I touched on this in the crossover episode that we did. I was concerned about this going into this game, not just because of Kyle Fuller, but because this is simply what Ben Roethlisberger does against the Denver Broncos. At one point or another during the game, he has a 50-plus yard completion to somebody. And of course, in this game, it had to be against Kyle Fuller. And then, of course, you have the pass interference, which argue the call all you want, it still happened. So
yeah.
Then he had another play where he was out on the perimeter trying to make a tackle and he just kind of froze. So
multiple third downs too.
Yeah, multiple third down conversions for the Steelers because of Kyle Fuller. And I just think it's a good time for Ron Darby to come back. I think Patrick Surtain has done enough to where if he's not in the starting lineup with Ronald Darby this coming week, and of course Bryce Callahan in the slot, I would be very surprised and I'd be a little upset by that. Not to say that Kyle Fuller doesn't deserve a second chance, but we know that Vic Fangio is all about the meritocracy. He's all about earning your stripes out there.
Yeah.
He's all about the best player must play. And I don't feel like Kyle Fuller's been the best player. And Fangio even said it after the game. Look, he had a bad game. So not necessarily to say you bench the guy permanently, but maybe you do bench him for a week or so and just kind of give him a chance to reset mentally. And you never know what that could do for a guy when you throw him on the bench and things like that. But man, it's been brutal, and Fuller's got to be self-aware enough to be able to see that as well. And the Broncos have to figure something out. You can't keep giving up big plays, and now you're going up against a Raiders team that has a lot of explosive vertical threats in the passing game, notably Henry Ruggs, Darren Waller, Brian Edwards. These guys all make big plays, and I just don't think the Broncos can afford those kind of errors in a huge divisional matchup. You've just lost 2 big AFC games against teams that plan on being in contention throughout the year. So now you've got 2 tiebreakers against you. So you've got to win one back against the Raiders in a desperate, desperate way. The Broncos are going to be scratching and clawing against this Raiders team. And frankly, to me, Kyle Fuller needs to be benched for that game.
Oh, I know he's no longer a Denver Bronco, but remember when Vic Fangio benched Isaac Yiadom a few years ago? And then when he finally earned his way back in, he played phenomenal for them. He really did to end the season. Look, Kyle Fuller's a veteran. He knows his defense. And really going back to his plays that he gave up, it's an execution thing. It's not like the guy's making a great play against him and that he's got great coverage. He is getting burnt. He is getting beat, and they are targeting him on the vertical stuff. They're targeting him on in-breaking routes. And look, you have to put a guy like Ronald Darby out there opposite of, a star player right now, a rising rookie player in Patrick Surtain, who's had his struggles too. Patrick Surtain in this game came up and he missed several tackles. There's no excuse in that. The defense as a whole, they looked rough outside, bits and pieces and spurts. Malik Reed obviously had a great game. We talked about the dropped interceptions by Alexander Johnson. The run defense is starting to concern me a little bit now. And look, Sayre, it also goes back. I think we're seeing right now how much the Broncos are missing Josie Jewell at this point at the inside backer position. Justin Sternad, like I said, there's things that he does really well, but he's still a young guy. So he's going to make more of these mistakes than a veteran guy like Josie Jewell is. It's evident as day. So in your opinion, to close out today's episode, Lockdown Broncos postgame report, what do you think the bigger issue is right now with the Broncos defense, and how do you think they solve it?
I think you're spot on there with Justin Sternada. And obviously Kyle Fuller situation, we've addressed that at length, but they are missing Josie Jewell. And I think that they understood that based on their scouting from the first 4 weeks, right? That's why you go out and you try out players like Avery Williamson and Dylan Cole. And they signed Avery Williamson, the veteran inside linebacker, to the practice squad. So we know that he's on notice right now. They brought him in. They said, all right, here's the playbook. Let's get you onto the field as soon as possible. I wouldn't be surprised, Cody, at all if Avery Williamson is kind of replacing Justin Sternad as the number one inside linebacker next to Alexander Johnson, of course, in the coming weeks here. As soon as he gets up to speed on that playbook, I think Justin Sternad is going to revert to his previously planned role as kind of being a nickel or dime linebacker player option for them, because that's what he's excelling at. He had a really big error in this game, in my opinion. One of the biggest runs for the game from Najee Harris. He came off the right guard, who did a great job of sealing the defensive lineman, but Justin Sternad just didn't fit in right behind him. He just completely whiffed, and Najee Harris he went to stiff arm him, and there was Justin Sternad took such a bad angle that he didn't even hit his helmet or shoulder pads or anything. He threw a stiff arm at air, and I think he was even surprised by that, but Sternad's angle was just so poor that he wasn't there to fit his lane, and that was a huge issue to me in the running game. We've seen some good from him, but we've also seen some bad. And Avery Williamson, we know throughout his career, he's excelled against the run. He's been one of those reliable guys in that regard. So I think that's obviously a direction you've got to go. You bring a guy in, he's going to play, and I think he could make a big difference.
Yeah, and just looking at the defense too, same thing as the offense. Players didn't execute, and I felt like the coaches, I felt like Vic was outcoached in this game. Sad to say. Look, I'm a big Vic Fangio fan, a big supporter of him. I like his defensive philosophy, but when you're just getting snake bit by the same stuff for this, 2 consecutive weeks in a row, it is a cause for concern, and I understand, but you have to be willing to adjust a little bit and change things that aren't working. And it felt like they still stuck with the same game plan in some situations. It came back to bite them in the tail once again here. So not just a collectively bad day by the Broncos offense, defense, coaching staff, everybody. And unfortunately, we're sitting here, we're talking about a loss, the second loss in the season for the Broncos, who had gotten off to a 3-0 start at one point, dropping 2 in a row. And look, it doesn't get any easier. The Raiders, the Browns, and then you have another matchup coming in, and then you Washington football team, where hopefully Jerry Jeudy will be back, and then you have the Eagles, and then the Cowboys, and then a bye week. I mean, it is a brutal first half end of the stretch here for the Broncos. So, Sayre, my friend, Broncos country, thank you so much for being graceful with us as we try to navigate through these waters. But look, Sayre, I think one thing to kind of leave in this message, we know a lot of changes are coming with this Broncos organization at the end of the season. Some could happen in season, but we know there are going to be a lot of changes after the season. Doesn't give you much to look forward to, but some things that maybe some good things could be coming down the pike for the Denver Broncos. But that's why Sayre and I, we have you covered every single day. Locked On Broncos, available on your favorite audio podcasts and platforms, free, not to mention on YouTube. You can watch us. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you can interact with both Sayre and myself. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to us talk Broncos, even through the thick and thin, the bad times, the good times. Sayre and I were always here for that. So Broncos country, mile high salute to you. Thank you so much. We'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode. Locked On Broncos. Send in your mailbag questions to us on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger. We'll see you tomorrow.